Hi everyone, my name's Kathryn Eccles and this is my colleague.
I'm Yayoi Teramoto.
And sadly Chico can't be with us today, but he's here in spirit. We're all from the Oxford Internet Institute and we had this wonderful project mapping playful spaces in the museum. So the idea for this project really came from about 2 years ago when Yayoi and I had a series of workshops with our colleague Alice Purkis in Humanities with museums and heritage organisations to try and float the idea of what we might do together with social data. I think social media data is often seen as a fantastic opportunity and untapped resource for understanding audiences and engagement. But actually, little is known about the tools that you can use to unpack some of these data sources. So we wanted to grapple with those tools a little bit, pilot some of them, and see what we could learn about visitor engagement from these images. Our background is at the Internet Institute, so we're interested in the theory and the academic context of some of this work, thinking about cultural analytics as a discipline, whether you can use data science tools to understand quite subjective experiences and subject areas. But we're really interested at the moment in these sort of hybrid cultural spaces, or at least I think we are, where museums, heritage organisations and the public can come together and start co-creating experiences and co-curating material.
So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is how we did the data collection. So when you go to Instagram, you can type in Ashmolean Museum and it'll give you two things. One of them is the Ashmoleans account, and the other thing is a location. So whenever visitors go to the Ashmolean, take pictures and post it on Instagram, they have the option to say, this picture was taken at the Ashmolean. So we used those images, and we got pictures that were taken between November 2017 and June 2019, and that gave us a total of 24,377 images, which I hope you'll agree with me is quite a lot of images. To give you a sense of what the data looked like, we didn't find that there were any particular months that were more popular than others, but more pictures were posted on Instagram on the weekends, which I think reflects when people visit the museum. And then in the third plot here, the two vertical lines are the opening and closing times of the Ashmolean. And you can see that the posting times don't really match up with that. So what this tells us is that people will visit the museum, go home, and then maybe look at the pictures that they took that day, decide which ones are Instagram worthy, and then post. And this is consistent with some of the other work that we've done with other heritage sites. Now the question is, how do you go about analyzing 24,000 images? If you want to do it by hand, it will take you a long, long time, and we wouldn't have been able to present anything today. So we decided to use computer vision tools to help us do this. And what I wanted to show here is a little bit about how the tools that we used work. So they take an input, which is an image in our case, and it goes through a lot of processing in the computer, and what we want to get out of it is, from the image, what's in the image. In this case, 2 people and 1 car. And the way that these networks get trained is that the computer is shown many, many images with labeled data. So it says, this is what a car looks like. And then when I show you a picture of a car, you can tell me it's a car. Or the same thing with a person. We didn't go and train one of these networks ourselves. We used a network that was already pre-trained. So all of the all the IDs that it found were not museum specific. So it can't really tell us whether a sculpture was Greek or Roman. But it did find a lot of categories that are quite relevant to what we were looking for. So it found human faces, it found women, sculptures, picture frames, it also found men. Sorry, I didn't put that in. Clothing, and then in the picture in the middle, it even manages sometimes to identify something a little bit more detailed, like that's a dragonfly and that's a butterfly, and there's a berry in there somewhere. In total, we get many, many objects being identified. The heights of the bars in this plot are the percentages of photos or of identifications that were each one of these categories. A lot of them were people or people-related things like clothing, faces, even footwear. And in this example, it finds two sculptures. It identifies a human face on one of the sculptures, and it even identifies the foldable chairs in the Ashmolean, which I think is quite impressive. Another example is this one, where it really does find many of the picture frames in the picture. It sees that there is a woman in the picture, and it can even say that she's wearing shoes. One thing you might notice is it doesn't get that all of the picture frames in the picture, and it might not get every single detail, but it is a good way of getting a really quick sense of what people are taking photos of. But the real question we had in mind was to learn something about playful behavior in the museum. Unfortunately, there are no computer algorithms that predefine playfulness. So for this, we had to do a little bit of hand coding. We took a subset of 300 images that the computer said had people in them, and we tried to code them for a couple of things. The first one was, were there actually people in the photograph? Some of them, like the top picture, did have people, but some of them, like the one in the bottom, were just sculptures of people that were identified as people. How many people were in each picture? Of the photos that actually had photographs, 25% of them had more than one person. So this tells us a little bit about whether people visit in groups or not. How many of them were subjects? So by this I mean, the girl in the top is clearly the subject of the photograph, whereas the people in the bottom are just kind of in the background mingling, and the subject is probably an event that's taking place at the Ashmolean. But a large percentage of them, 80% of photos with people, had people as subjects. Were they selfies? A third of the photos with subjects were selfies. And the thing that we wanted to really get at was interaction. So by interaction, we meant photos where people were actively doing something in the space, whether it was posing, like the picture on the top, or pointing, or even doing something active like sketching, or even sketches. The bottom picture here I put as an example of an image we didn't consider to have interaction. Even though they're posing in front of the collection, I think the subject is more them being there than anything particular in the space that they're at. Even with this definition, 50% of the photos with subjects had interactions. This tells us a little bit about how people visit the museum and want to actively show that they interacted with the space around them. And now I think the question that's in everyone's head is, why is this useful? How can this be useful to the museums? And I think a very quick answer is the computer tools that we are using are a very good way to sift through tons and tons of data and find patterns. And to give you a case study, I'll leave you with this. Some of you might recognize it from the Jeff Koons exhibition from last year. And there are many pictures of people taking mirror selfies with all the beautiful reflective surfaces that there were in that exhibition. And they might all have felt that they were very original taking this selfie, but it turns out a lot of people liked taking mirror selfies. Anyways, any questions?